I'm Nicole Shanahan, Bobby Kennedy's running mate. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public. The only logical and beneficial approach to addressing the climate crisis is regenerative agriculture.
We're doing the same thing with corn. We've got our own breeding program going on with corn, and this is genetics that are 25 years old.
Childhood cancer rate should not be as high as it is.
I can't believe what it costs for two people to eat organic, healthy food.
We've seen people overcome serious cancer diagnosis with changes in diet.
If you are constantly worrying about a financial crisis, you don't think your brain is not fully engaged on where it needs to be to make your farm better.
When I started my journey in regenerative agriculture, it came only narrowly through carbon drawdown. Rick, so the first time I became aware of your work was after watching Common Ground, which I'm an executive producer on.
Yes.
And in it, you really tell your story, and you are so generous with sharing your story on how you arrived to becoming a regenerative farmer.
Right.
I was moved. I know everyone who's seen the film in that segment is moved by your story.
Thank you.
You started your career as a conventional farmer, and then you had this big event in your family that really changed your life.
That's right. You know, I'm no different than most farmers that farm around the world. We learn from our ancestors. So we learn from our father, we learn from our grandfather, and then that's just how it is. So that's how we used to do it. And one day, it only took a 1-inch rain, which is not very much rain, if you think about it. And this was on a field that has a 1% slope. So it's almost so flat, you can't tell it's that flat. And the erosion that occurred from that event absolutely woke me up and said, it's time to change. And, you know, I wanna also say that this whole journey, I've been guided where to go. God has guided me where He wants me to go to make the most change that we can make. I truly believe that because of the thing. When I think back of how things were lining up and when they happened at certain times and certain people come into your life at certain times, that's all for a reason. Those things happen for reasons. And that's where this journey has taken me. So I'm very, very pleased and very proud of what we've done here. And I think my ancestors would be proud also.
You've understood the connection very personally between what we put on our crops and the health impacts. Tell me about that journey.
Right. My beautiful wife, Carol, is a stage 4 metastatic breast cancer survivor. And you don't learn about things until they step into your life. So then at that point, we become very knowledgeable on cancer. And I will always remember going to the first oncologist visit with her, and the doctor is trying to figure out, how does a 30-year-old have breast cancer? How's this possible?
She was so young.
Yeah. And so the first thing the doctor is what's in your diet? What are you eating? And Carol started listing, and he's assessing things, and I don't want to mention what some of the things were by name, but products that were sugar-free, those were the ones that he said you have to stop taking those. So, in his opinion, if you were going to drink a soda or a pop, he would prefer you to drink the sugared version than the artificial sugared version. Okay. So that gets you to be thinking about those artificials are man-made and what's happening here. So you think about that, and then she thank God she's healed and time is moving on, and we had both of our daughters were born at that time, so she's trying to manage cancer, raise the children. I'm still trying to farm. I mean, it was just a very hectic time of our life. Then I have an uncle who farmed his whole life, dies of prostate cancer. So again, you're not thinking a lot about it, but here's another family member dying of cancer. Then 23-year-old nephew has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Mm-hmm. And now everything is starting to kind of click, and now it's like enough. We are going to take the regenerative practices that we've been implementing on the farm, and we're going to go the next level, and we're going organic. Mm-hmm. And we are going to do away with all of those inputs, all of them. And when you realize how dangerous some of these inputs are, you then quickly decide in your mind, how am I going to shelter our grandchildren and our children from this? How are we going to do that? Mm-hmm. And by doing what we did, I think is the correct way. Now, this is, Nicole, this is hard to farm this way. It's very hard on scale to farm with no chemistry, no fertilizer, none of those things. It can be done.
Well, no artificial chemistry.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we decided as a family, Carol and I decided as a family, we've got to go organic and we've got to get everything out off this farm. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've done.
The disease rates amongst conventional farmers have skyrocketed. Mental health challenges among farmers have skyrocketed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Financial burdens have skyrocketed. And the general feeling I get from meeting with farmers today is that the government has been working against them, especially as it relates to their own health, their own ability to farm more safely, which is hard work.
Yes.
And seems to be continuing to reward conventional practices, specifically in corn, wheat, and soy.
Right.
And so now we're looking at this from a human health perspective. We're looking at it from an economic perspective. And then we're also looking at like long-term sustainability of our food supply in this country. Mm-hmm. It seems like we're prioritizing the wrong things in each of these categories right now. As a country that has one of the largest farm and food bills, the Farm Bill this year is going to be the first farm bill in the United States that's going to exceed $1 trillion.
That's nuts.
It's expected to be about $1.5 trillion. More than 80% of that goes to programs like SNAP. Mm-hmm. So it's misnamed the Farm Bill because we're not actually supporting farming with this bill. And then you look at the statistics around where most of SNAP goes. The largest product purchase with SNAP is soda, which is packed full of corn syrup. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the remaining 15% of the Farm Bill, which is actually for farmers.
Right.
And the majority of that goes to crop insurance. But the way you farm, you're not even eligible for that crop insurance. Is that right?
Well, we'll talk now. Let's go into that. So when we started down this journey, and we were getting pretty radical. I mean, we were planting soybeans in the 6-foot-tall soil rye. It's unheard of. So I, fortunately, in my travels, and I travel a lot, and I'm trying to teach as many people as we possibly can. And we're trying to reach as many people as we can. But in my travels, I run into the head of RMA. And RMA is Risk Management Agency. That's the part, I'm not sure what the A is, but it's the Risk Management Division of Multi-Peril Insurance. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they are setting the rules that the farmer has to follow to be in compliance to get multi-peril crop insurance. Okay, one of the rules that would get you out of compliance is planting soybeans in the 6-foot-tall cereal rye. Because their thought process at that time was, we are going to affect the yield to a point to where it's going to trigger a payment. So why would we want to promote a practice that's automatically going to trigger a payment? That was their mindset. But through talking to this gentleman who was the head of RMA at the time, and I had multiple meetings with him after the fact, he got to understand what we were doing and understanding the benefits of what the cover crop was doing. Yes. Same thing happened in Iowa. Iowa is a very big state for what they call relay cropping. So relay cropping is when you go out in the fall and you are going to turn off certain rows of your air seeder and you're going to plant rye. So you're going to have 2 rows of rye, 2 rows of skip, 2 rows of rye, 2 rows of skip across the field. Next spring you come in and you plant soybeans in between those 2 cereal rye rows. So now you have a cereal rye crop that you're going to harvest, and then behind that comes a soybean crop. That process is now fully accepted with RMA because of farmers like me talking and explaining to them the benefits of what these practices can do.
And the benefits of moving from strictly monocropping to diversified crops. You organized yesterday, which I was very grateful to attend, a convening of all of these incredible regenerative farmers and innovators. And you had scientists in the room too, really guiding it.
Right.
Scientists that work with the farmers day in and day out to explain what's going on with the soil microbiome.
Right.
And I've sat in so many academic forums with scientists and clinicians typically. And this was my first one of sitting in a convening with farmers and scientists.
And you learned something, didn't you?
It was one of the most effective forums for exchanging information that I had ever been in.
Right.
And people walked away with a real roadmap of how they were going to turn over their crop just this season.
Right.
So they walked away with information that they're going to execute on immediately.
Yeah.
And I was really inspired by that. And it made me very optimistic. And hearing your story about changing the minds of the RMA by making the point that monocropping depletes soil health and soil microbiome. And yesterday I learned that seeds themselves have their own microbiome.
Not only on the outside, but on the inside.
On the inside of the seed, 9
billion.
9 billion
That's more people on the
microbes
planet.
Within a seed.
More people on the planet.
It's wild to me.
Yes.
It's incredibly inspiring to think about it. But then when I heard what common conventional farming practices do with seed protectant, and what a seed protectant is, sterilizes the seed and kills the microbial life within the seed.
That's right.
This really rocked me to hear about how big of an industry even seed protectant is, and it's killing our seed supply.
That's the mountain that we're going to be climbing, not only in big ag on the chemical side of the equation, but big pharma on the health side of the equation. Huge mountains to climb. And I want to go back and reflect on something you talked about earlier, about the legislators seem to be attacking the Farm Bill the wrong way. And let's think about this for a second. We've got conventional farmers that are farming with heritage. This is the way they were taught, and they don't know any other way, okay? Well, maybe the politicians don't know any other way either, because maybe the politicians think that they have to help the farmer to be able to survive. Well, maybe what we need to do is shift that paradigm there and get them to understand that if we would move away from synthetic fertilizers, move away from monocultures, that the farmer can stand on their own, and then guess what? They don't need any money from the government. And we throw the word government around pretty loosely. That's us. We are the people who are paying that bill. Everybody says the government is paying it's the people.
It's the people.
And we should be mad about that. And one thing that's always surprised me is typically when you give somebody money in a not an entitlement, but like what we're talking about, typically you would ask for something in return, right? Mm-hmm. What do they ask for the farmer in return? Nothing. Why don't we? I mean, I have a way. I think I could solve this problem. Mm-hmm. I would have 5 tiers, and I would say, you know what? If you want to farm like Rick does, you get tier 5. You get everything we've got to offer. But if you want to be tier 1 where you don't do anything, then you don't get any money. Mm-hmm. So why don't we ask the farmer to help us in return for getting the subsidy payments? Mm-hmm. That's what I don't understand.
Well, let's talk about what that return actually looks like, because right now everything is measured in yield.
That's right.
It's not measured in nutrient density, it's definitely not measured in safety for human
Plant health.
It's not measured in soil health.
No.
It's not measured in the ability of the crop to help somebody out with their obesity. Mm-hmm. There's no consideration of offsetting our $4.6 trillion healthcare budget.
That's staggering.
There's no measurement in carbon drawdown. So all of the things that are the most important on as for policy agenda, it's completely absent, and they're not on the list. And it strikes me that it wouldn't be that hard to put them on the list.
That's what I mean. I think we've got the same thing happening in parallel with the farmer out here that doesn't understand. You know what? They drive by the road and they look over and they say, I don't know what that guy's doing. I wish somebody could tell me what he's doing. You know, and I always, our driveway's always open. Pull in and ask questions.
That's cool.
But the next thing that needs to happen is we have to get an army of teachers trained, okay? Because, I mean, folks like me and Christine Jones and John Kemp, we can only reach so many people. Mm-hmm. And last year, we did the first ever inaugural training event here. It's never been done in the United States before. I got to thinking about who should we really be training? And we put out an invitation. Every state in the United States has a soil health specialist. That's what they're called. There's one. Now, some states like California may have multiple because of how vast the state is. Yeah. But every state has one. We put out an invitation to every state, every soil health specialist to come. 17 of them came to here. And we had
That's pretty good.
That's great. Think about that. 17
for your inaugural event. That's great.
17 states showed up. We had a 2-day training event, and every single one of them said it was the best training event they've ever been to. Ever.
Wow.
Now, as a result of that, there are that I know of, there's at least 5 more trainings happening this summer because of them coming here. They're going home and doing a training event at their home. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. That's the teaching, because then that will trickle down to thousands of people.
Yeah, it sure will. I've been working in regenerative agriculture, trying to come up with the right model to help farmers financially overcome those initial burdens, because it is really hard to start up a regenerative practice. It is cost prohibitive for the majority of farmers today. And I've looked at different ideas related to stimulus or tax incentives, even private-public partnerships, because their interest is there. That's what we learned after Kiss the Ground went out as a film, was that the demand for this produce is there. The supply is the piece that's really hard to increase. And what I learned yesterday from the meeting as well is that there could be growers, small, medium-sized growers, but then distribution, branding, and really getting the produce out to market.
Was that CPG or things? That's what they call that? Packaging. It's the middle ground.
Yeah.
Farmer, consumer, and then the folks you're talking about right here in the middle.
Yeah, and when we compete with the big food brands, and you look at where most of their budget goes to, it's marketing and CPG. So there seems to be a private market opportunity to create a distribution channel if there's an entrepreneur out there who's really excited about doing this. There was a mention of almost like a Shopify for getting this produce out there. And I've seen some investors and entrepreneurs looking for that. But let's talk about the realities of starting up one of these operations. What are the first things a farmer can do if they don't have a lot of CapEx available?
Well, the first thing that we did to really get started in this was we went to the local USDA NRCS office and we signed up for a program called EQIP. And I can't tell you what the acronym is, EQIP. I can't give you the acronym, but what it is a 3-year program that pays you money to help offset the cost of the cover crop seed and offset the cost of the tillage, the drill to plant this cover crop seed, because most farmers don't have either one.
It's a no-till drill, right?
Yeah. So that right there is what got me really, and I think we did what it was designed to do. It's designed to make the farmer comfortable with doing this change event on their farm. So then when the 3 years is up, they are now educated to move this across the rest of their farm. Okay. Now, there's problems to this though. A lot of people think that, especially in today's society, we need whatever it is to happen now. It has to happen now. Well, you're not going to see that quick of a change in
It's not how nature works.
That's right.
Yeah.
So sometimes certain things don't develop and you really don't see a change until years 4 and 5. Well, the EQIP program just ran out. And I know several people that used to be in this, and then I see them on walking down the street or at the grocery store and I say, hey, I thought you were doing cover crop. Well, yeah, but that was 3 years and EQIP ran out, so I just quit doing it. And
do you know how much EQIP was budgeted for?
I think in Indiana, I don't know the number of what it was for the country, but in Indiana, we were getting paid about $40 an acre.
Okay.
For cover crop seed and the planting. Yeah. And that gave the farmer a way to look at this change in farming practices without the financial risk. Okay. So now let's now come in where you're talking about. So let's say an individual did the 3-year EQIP, and then after that, maybe a middle person steps in and does maybe a financial program for the next 2 years. And I don't know what that looks like. I'm not in that world. But if it was me, I would have, the way interest rates have climbed now, I would have something that's low interest, if not zero interest, and then give this individual maybe an extra year or 2 to pay back that. But you're talking about what I would call green money that needs to or wants to invest that money, and they're not so much looking at it as a return on their investment, but they're looking at it to help the cause. I don't know how much of that money there is. So again, I'm not in this world. You know way more about this than I do. But that is where I think you need to maybe think about piggybacking on the backside of that EQIP program.
Well, and let's also just think about the fact that the Farm Bill is mostly SNAP, which is about giving food stamps out to those in need to go to the grocery store and buy food.
Right.
And
buy
if they're
soda.
Number one purchase is soda, which
That's
is
crazy.
corn syrup, which it is one of the crops that we support most with our farm bill. We mostly support wheat, soy, and corn. But going back to the detrimental health effects of how this money is being spent, over $20 billion is being spent on soda. And that $20 billion is ending up in the hands of the soda manufacturer, which is big food, right? These big food conglomerates. It's processed food conglomerates. And that soda is causing diabetes crisis in the country, which is leading individuals to be prescribed Ozempic, which is a stomach paralysis drug.
I never understood this one.
And the government is paying for a lot of the Ozempic prescriptions and through the Affordable Care Act. And so the cost of that is I think it's over $10,000 a patient a year.
Oh my gosh.
So none of this makes any sense. If you really trace where the money is going, it's all going to, big processed food. It's going to big pharma, and it's going to big ag and agrochemical.
Right.
It's very, very clear, the map.
Very clear.
So we're broke. This is broken. This is wrong. This is all wrong in every single possible way you could think about it. If you took these trillions of dollars and you just even took 10, I mean, this is why I love this group yesterday. John Kempf was like, well, I've got a great policy plan, but I think it's going to cost $10 billion.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I was like, that's nothing. That is nothing compared to how much is already going out there for these other programs that are keeping people in poverty and making people sick.
Yeah.
So my greatest hope is when I'm in these groups, and these are individuals that have taken virtually no government dollars and are self-carrying the burden of doing the right kind of farming practices and putting nutrient-dense medicine on people's tables, because food is medicine. Good nutrient-dense food is 100% medicine.
Sure.
We had 3 people in the room yesterday who openly discussed curing uncurable diseases, like colitis, which is really hard to cured with food and good diet. Another gentleman had a uncurable degenerative eye disease that he cured with diet.
Right.
We've seen people overcome serious cancer diagnosis with changes in diet.
There were 2 people in that room that did that. They had health, I don't know if it was, both were stage 4. My wife was stage 4. The other individual, I'm not sure, but they both changed their diet and they're still here today. They were in that group yesterday.
See, so that's that. I mean, that's representative of a good percentage of everyone in that room.
Right.
I've seen women restore their fertility with changes to what they eat and expose themselves to, reducing all of these toxins and foreign exposures to the body. So $10 billion that John Kempf put forward as a policy to foundationally fix our food supply and our health in this country, that is a huge ROI.
That ought to be an easy check to write, shouldn't it?
That is, for the government,
Yeah.
This is a very easy check for the government to write.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And you're right, that is huge ROI. Again, it's going to take, we also have to, let's put some things into perspective, okay? There's about 900 million acres of crops grown in the United States. So let's just stay in the United States. So let's say that, what would success look like to you in your administration of regenerative? What percentage of those acres?
When I started my journey in regenerative agriculture, it came only narrowly through carbon drawdown.
Yeah.
And my goal back then as a philanthropist was, let's do 100 million acres and increase soil organic matter by 5%.
Okay.
Which is a lot.
But that's doable.
But if you look at the average soil organic matter in the United States, it's less than 2%.
Yeah.
And you increase that up to 6-7% on 100 million acres, we get close to a pretty balanced carbon cycle in this country. We can pay off almost the entirety of this nation's carbon debt with that kind of effort.
Right.
So that was my initial interest in regenerative agriculture. When I think about it now in my position running for Vice President of the United States and pushing through a $10 billion regenerative agriculture bill, my goal then becomes more along the lines of how do we do this for 200 million acres? We can double it, right? Because I was working with tens of millions of dollars from my foundation, but working with a federal budget, you get to do more. You're expected to do more.
Yeah.
And my hope would be to roll out programs like EQIP for farmers representing 200, to start a 200 million acre target.
So your numbers are pretty close to mine. I think success would look like 30%.
Yeah.
That's 270, let's say 300 million acres. Okay. So let's talk about let's just use your number, 200 million acres. Let's talk about that. Do you know how much cover crop seed that's going to take to cover those acres? We're not even close. We don't even have close to enough seed. Okay. Teachers that are going to take to educate, and I'm not on, I mean, yesterday's event was great, but let's go to a different scenario. Let's go to an event where there's 500 people in the audience and I've been asked to come and I give a keynote and I'm up there on stage for an hour and a half. And I mean, by the time I'm done, everybody is like, yes, here we go. Okay, then what's Rick do? Rick says, answers questions, says goodbye, gets in his truck and he drives home. Who's the support group now for that 500 group that was sitting? Now, did Rick say we're going to do this, or did he say we're going to do this? And this is a problem, because if they do not have success the first time they try something new, they're never coming back. Never coming back. And we have to make sure, and if you think about what we have in this country, we already have the support group. The USDA is in every state, every county. And extension from academia is from the land grants are already in position. So we have to figure out, if we can't get enough folks like me out doing this, then let's look at the current infrastructure we have. How do we get these people educated? And because and
the seed resources
and the seed, all this has got to be, we just can't say that tomorrow we're going to do 200 million acres. It's not going to happen. And we have to understand this. And to
be fair, my 100 million acres was a lifetime goal.
No, I get that. But we're talking about making a shift in this country to a regenerative type farming.
Yeah.
Cover crops are part of that. No-till's part of that. And teaching and educators are part of that.
Yep.
So
seed, equipment, and people.
Yeah.
Teachers.
Yeah. So now let's say, when you guys win, you now have 4 years to make this happen, right? So figure out, how do we step into this to then get the people comfortable and get them, and I'm going to tell you, I get the same answer every time. Why didn't I do this 10 years ago? Every time.
What do you think the overall success rate is for people?
That shift to regenerative practices?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good question. Less than 25%.
Less than 25%.
But those people that do make the shift, they're like, wow, why? I've got money in my bank account. I'm not under stress. My mind is open again. I can think. That's a big deal. If you are constantly worrying about a financial crisis, you don't think, your brain is not fully engaged on where it needs to be to make your farm better, you're actually going backwards probably. And you just get deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
But once you take all those constraints off and those limitations are gone, and you can open your mind up, you then become creative again. And you start to look at things that are of the abnormal. That's how I've always been. I want to be abnormal. I want to look at things that are not being looked at by the big crowd. I want to be looking at things that are being looked at by no one. And then figure out how to make those better. And that's all we've done here is test. We test here all the time.
I still think 25% in the current environment, which disfavors doing the conversion.
That's probably pretty good.
It's pretty damn good. So if you think about what happens if the government encourages these conversions more and with long-term visions of support, then that number could easily skyrocket up to over 75%.
Sure. Yeah.
The shift to me does not seem insurmountable by any means, given how bad and illogical the current structure is.
Well, the industries have made farming very easy right now. Okay, I'm not saying it's profitable. I'm saying it's easy. So you've got a traded seed that will handle any chemical known to man or woman. So you got that. You've got an easy button that you can push. If you do have a weed problem out here, you just go get the sprayer out, you load it up with chemical, and you go out and spray. And everything's taken care of. And you've got traits that make the corn stand. You now have traits that give corn drought resistance. I mean, when I look at the genetics today compared to just 15 years ago, it's not even the same plant anymore.
Yeah.
It's changed that much. It's not corn.
It's something that looks like corn, but its constituent parts are not actually corn.
That's right. And that's what the farmer wants, because it gives them, I don't want to say the word guarantee, but it raises their chances of success immensely.
Right.
And it makes it comfortable.
If success is weighed in the actual weight of the yield,
that's the problem.
And that's it, then they're winning.
The system's perfect for them.
The system's perfect. But if you're measuring success in food,
or health of the human civilization,
or health of the human civilization, or health of the soil, you failed every single time.
That's right. That's right.
So
and I want to say something else real quick. I can tell you care about your body. You take care. You eat well. It's expensive to eat the food that's healthy for you. I mean, Carol goes to the store, and there's just two of us here now. Our beautiful children are gone. I can't believe what it costs for two people to eat organic, healthy food.
Yeah. This is the thing that infuriates me the most, is that we have a country with by acre some of the most farmland in the world. And our history as a nation has always been as farmers.
And leaders.
If you go back over 100 years, the majority of families farmed. And we're now a nation that has become very sick and very detached from our food systems. We have infrastructure in place that incentivizes the growing and production of artificial foods that are making us incredibly sick. And we're now paying for a sick care system as a result.
Yeah. When I noticed something, you have to look around. You've got to open your eyes up. You got to look around. I noticed something the other day I never thought about. We're driving through a big city, and it doesn't matter what it was. It was a city of 1 million people plus. And you know what the most beautiful and dynamic buildings were in that city? Hospitals. Why in the world do we need multi-million-dollar hospitals being built? That right there, that is a 50,000-foot view of things, but that's like common sense. We shouldn't need all these expensive hospitals taking care of our patients. We need to fix the healthcare system through the farming practices that we're doing.
Well, look at what is celebrated today in our society. It's just watching the Super Bowl. We had worked on a Super Bowl ad for Bobby Kennedy, and it aired around not long after Pfizer aired its ad. And Pfizer's ad was glorifying a young girl coming out of cancer treatment out of the shiny hospital.
Yeah.
And you know, rather than glorifying reducing our cancer rates in this country by doing the right thing for the American family, you don't see a TV commercial about that.
No.
You see a TV commercial about a child lucky enough to survive a cancer diagnosis. And it's celebrated, you know, it's celebrated. Thank you, Pfizer. But then you look at why that child got sick in the first place, and we are not, as a nation, intelligent enough to understand that this is not a mark of success and innovation. Pfizer glorifying a cancer treatment is not the sign of success.
No, we're happy the child survived, but there's other ways that this could happen.
The childhood cancer rate should not be as high as it is, that we are normalizing the sale of childhood cancer treatments at the largest live watched event in our country, the Super Bowl.
Around the world, yeah.
Around the world. I mean, this to me is a sign that we need to change things very, very abruptly. We need to stand up for ourselves. We need to call things out as being as absurd as they have become. And
and I think you and your team are doing that. Yeah, you're bringing more reality to the forefront.
Yeah. We should be going to the root cause of the issue, and we should be glorifying overcoming the root causes of disease.
Right.
That's what I want the future of this country to be celebrating, is that we've overcome all of these root causes of our greatest illnesses.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like you said, diabetes is on the rise, autoimmune diseases. It's just, and when you think about the correlation of the timing of when these things have occurred, do you know when the first genetically modified species was made?
It was after World War II.
No, 1997.
It was 1997?
1997. So I'm talking about crops that we raise. There may have been some other things genetically modified, but soybeans were 1997.
Okay.
When you start to think about to put your team to work on the research of when did some of these things start to escalate, these health crises, and you're probably going to find a timeline that coincides with when the genetically modified species were brought.
Right, and GMOs were a response to chemical spraying.
Yeah.
A direct response.
Well, yeah.
Because they needed seeds that could survive
and part of
being sprayed with such heavy chemicals.
Part of the what's the word I want to use here? Part of the reason why they thought that they were necessary also was to help the third world countries, which were combating serious weed problems, help to give them seeds that they could then plant and grow and get crops in their countries. So I mean, it was a multifaceted approach.
Let's talk about the seed business. So the seed protectant,
it's poison.
It's poison. It kills the microbiome. Yesterday I heard something very inspiring, that even though these crops that have had their microbiomes destroyed, you know, they're pass on to their child seeds, these broken microbiomes, there's now proof that you can revitalize the poison seeds. And that once you revitalize the poison, well, you can revitalize the poison crops, which then produce seeds that are revitalized. So the good news is that there's this hereditary nature of regeneration in the seeds themselves, which I found to be very, very inspiring. I was really excited to see that. I spend a lot of time doing women's reproductive health, and a lot of chronic diseases are linked to non-genetic hereditary traits received from mother and father, a lot of times mother. And this idea that we can have regenerative human health is really inspiring to me, that if I spend my time regenerating my child's health, who may have received some adverse hereditary traits from me because I was exposed, that I can rebuild her microbiome or her foundational health, and that the next generation after her will receive those benefits.
Should be even better, right?
Very inspiring news.
Right.
And seeing it as well, like seeing the similar science discussed in a room full of farmers yesterday made me very excited.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the seed trade. You said something to me that I didn't realize before, which is there is a barrier to how much of this land we can regenerate because cover crop seeds are limited.
For right now. Yes.
How do we expand cover crop seed production?
Well, it's just like supply and demand. So once we get more acres that come on board, then the companies like Green Cover that Keith Burns owns, they will then expand their facilities, or there'll be other facilities like them developed, and then farmers will be contracted to raise crops, and then, I mean, we can quickly get that supply. We can get to the supply in a year or two.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
If we had the right implementation, the right infrastructures in place, and the right farmers that could grow these crops. And Keith, I don't know how far Keith reaches right now, but I know he's in multiple states. I mean, we grow cover crop seed for him. People in North Dakota do, South Dakota, Kansas. So there's a lot of places that are currently growing that probably could add acres to make even more seed. So I'm not real worried about the supply of the seeds. I mean, I didn't mean to alarm you by that, but all I meant to say was there's a lot of other things we have to think about that need to be in place
Infrastructure
also.
pieces,
Yes.
but they're doable.
They're doable.
So what I'm hearing is that it is possible for us to have a 200 million acre target in this country.
Yes, especially in the first 4 years of your administration, definitely.
Oh, hell yeah.
Definitely.
That makes me really excited to hear.
Yeah, but I want to talk a little bit more about seed, about what we're doing.
Okay.
And I'm going to say this probably multiple times throughout this little stretch, but you have to do this legally, okay, what I'm getting ready to say. Most people understand that GMO traded seeds are patented, okay? Meaning that I cannot plant a GMO, let's say soybean, save that soybean and plant it again. I'm breaking the law because that company has that patented. You cannot, no different than any patents you probably have or accustomed to. So what we did was I thought 4 or 5 years ago, I thought that the current seeds that we were available to get from the seed companies, they were breeding the seeds to lose associations with the mycorrhizal fungi or the microbial biome in general, okay? Now, I'm not saying they were doing this on purpose, but I'm saying through their trading of making a drought-tolerant seed, a seed that'll take fungicide, and all these things, they moved away from the associations that were naturally inherent within the soil. Okay, so I decided, you know what, we're going to create our own bean variety. We're going to do this legally. So I go to the USDA. They've got a building not very far from here that houses every seed known to man and woman, every seed.
That's neat.
So you go in and you pay for 50 seeds. So we bought 10 varieties that are off patent. They are now legal for anybody to buy.
Yep, because patents expire after 20 years.
Right. So now we're talking 20-year-old genetics that have not been mucked up with GMO tinkering and any of that. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's just standalone inherent genetics from that breeding program of whoever the seed company was. Mm-hmm. So we got 10 of these varieties in. You get 50 seeds. So your first thing you do is you plant these by hand and you're harvesting by hand. I know it sounds ridiculous, but then that grows into a pile, and then that pile grows into a bigger pile. And now after year 4, we've got enough to go out and plant 40 acres. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we have now harvested our seed stock from that 20-year-old line, and now this is what I call epigenetics. So we are allowing the seed to adapt to our system. This is the future. Okay.
So you're bringing it back to its natural habitat.
And here's the last thing I did, which some people agree and some people disagree. We had, out of that 10, we had 5 left, 5 varieties. Mm-hmm. And I had them sitting there in the field. I'm sitting in the combine, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't have 5 grain bins that we're going to put a little pile of seed in. So you know what we're going to do today? We're going to make a land race, and we're going to just combine them all together. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. So that is where we are getting our soybeans from now. We no longer buy soybean seed. Wow. Now think what that's going to do to the industry if the farmers no longer bought soybean seed. Now again, you've got to do this legal. We're doing the same thing with corn. We've got our own breeding program going on with corn, and this is genetics that are 25 years old. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, my great-grandfather started a seed company in 1929, and one of the plant breeders that I'm working with is going to get seeds that the same seeds my great-grandfather would have been crossing in 1929 to make the seed corn. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to have on this farm.
So effectively, you start your own seed development program
within your context of what you're doing out here.
And you make it so that whatever comes of it, however it propagates, is propagated specifically to the microbiome.
That's right.
That it's being raised in.
How would I know what seed is going to be the best in my environment? I'm going to let the environment tell me what seed's the best. And that's what we're doing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense because, you know, what I learned yesterday too is that it takes time for certain varietals to get used to the soil microbiome because they're coming with their own microbiome within the seed, and they're trying to figure out how to adapt successfully to the microbiome in the soil.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense that you would propagate a mix of like heritage seeds or other varietals together on the soil that you intend to grow those seeds.
And we do the same thing with our cereal grains. Same thing.
Wow.
We created a maslin. I didn't even know what a maslin was.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, I'll tell you real quick. Yeah. 3 years ago, I'm trying to figure out how we can maximize diversity. Mm-hmm. So I put together cereal rye, barley, and wheat. Mm-hmm. I mix those 3 together. And we go out and we plant this maslin in our fields, and I mean, it's thriving. Okay. Well, one night at the dinner table, I'm talking to my wife, Carol, and I'm explaining to her what I've been doing for the last 2 or 3 years, you know, just out of a conversation. Well, you know how powerful your phones are. Mm-hmm. The next day, I get a feed. I get an article that comes in on my feed on my phone, and it's about a 3,000-year-old tradition called maslins. I'm like, why am I getting this feed? So I start reading. I'm like, whoa, this is what I was talking to Carol about.
Yeah.
And it's a 3,000-year-old tradition. And not only did they plant these 3 together, they harvested them together and made bread out of the 3 cereal grains.
Right.
You know, high density, totally nutritious food for you to eat. And that's just how my brain works. I'm trying to think about how we do things. And then it just, lo and behold, it happened to be called a maslin. Uh-huh. Google it sometime.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
MASLIN.
I mean, that seems like a good use of our devices spying on us, but or good outcome.
I didn't want to say that, but yes, you know, they're not listening, but yet somehow those feeds come in.
I know. Oh dear. Well, that's a great story. So you've been experimenting out here on your own farm and seeing it beneficially translate economically. Is that true? Because that's been one of your biggest messages, is that this is a path towards farmers finding financial independence.
Yeah, if you research me and you look up some of the things I've done or what I talk about, you will not hear me talk about yield very often. It's not that yield is not important. You need yield to pay your bills, but this system is not being driven by yield. This system is being ran by human health, soil health, and return on your investment. That's what this farm is being ran by. And when you start to go down the road of chasing yield, it's not going to end well. It just typically does not end well, because you have invested a lot of money in inputs and you are totally leaving your livelihood up to Mother Nature and making sure you get your rain event when you need to get your rain event. Because if you don't get your rain event, your yield's going down. But guess what? That supplier who sent you all those inputs, they still want paid for their product. So we have to have risk aversion, right? You have to have a risk management program. I don't see how when a farmer goes to the bank and borrows the money to put out, right now corn is costing you about $900 an acre to put out an acre of corn. That's not the cash rent yet. That's just the inputs. $900 an acre. So then, I'm talking just general Midwest here. Most people are done planting by June the 1st. So by June the 1st, you have every bit of your
investment
is in the ground at June the 1st. Doesn't seem like very good risk management to me. And now you are relying on the next 90 days of weather to be acceptable to give you enough yield to make those payments.
Yeah.
When you look at our operation, we have hardly any expense at June 1st because we're raising our own seed, we're not using any inputs, and there's hardly any tillage. I mean, right now, from 2011 to now, we've cut our fuel bill by 50%.
Wow. And how many crops are you growing now? You're growing
about 8 different crops right now.
Yeah.
And we've cut our fuel bill in half.
Wow. That's a big deal. That's going to save...
We've cut our tractor horsepower...
tens of thousands of dollars.
In half.
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Right now, on a farm our size, we are saving $2.7 million in inputs.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And how about crop success across 07?
When we were at full, I'm very open about this. Right now we are regenerative organic. Okay, this is very hard, and no till. Regenerative organic with no tillage. This is very hard. There's not very many people doing this. I don't know if very many people like me, period. But anyway, I'm way over here. Okay, I'm not asking you to come over here, but I'm asking you to step away from where you are in your little comfort zone, get a little uncomfortable, and just come right here in the middle. Let's meet right here, and let's do some reduction of inputs. Let's incorporate cover crops, and let's incorporate no-till. That's all I'm asking you to do. When we were maximizing our ROI on this farm, it was under this scenario right here: 100% cover crop, 100% no-till, 100% non-GMO, and 70% reduction of inputs. 70. Okay, so I'm not asking you to take everything away. I'm not asking you to stop the chemistry. I'm just asking you to reduce by 70%.
So you're saving 70% of cost on inputs, but there's an additional cost of those cover crops.
Right. But our yields are increasing.
But your yields increase.
Yields increasing. and we're actually gaining on the ROI. Now, that's not part of the 2.7 million I just talked about. The 2.7 million is when we went organic and I took all of that 70% to 100.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the cost, you're receiving a lot more per acre when you're selling
With the crops,
a high demand,
right,
product like regenerative.
Corn and beans are double in
organic.
price. Double in price from what the conventional farmer gets.
Okay.
So $9 corn, $25, $30 soybeans.
Okay.
So when you start to understand that,
so you're saying you can double your income?
I'm doubling the amount of money that we're being paid over a conventional farmer for their commodity. So a conventional farmer right now is at $4.50 a bushel. We're at $9.
Wow.
Okay. So now when you,
that seems worth it.
It's huge and it's healthy.
Yeah.
Okay. But so now let's package all this up now. So we've got a $2.7 million savings that we're not writing that check for up front. We don't have all that risk taking place. We have a crop being grown that is healthy and diverse. Now, you asked me about yield. Again, I'm total transparent here. We took a 30% hit in yield when we did this. It just went shoom. But when you take that 30% yield with whatever you're left with now, take it times the expenses you have, which are hardly any.
Right.
It's enough money. It's more money than what we were making the other way.
So the math pans out because you're going to receive up to double the revenue. So you receive double revenue, reduce that by the 30%, but that washes itself out with a profit, and then you take away the expenses.
Right. It seems like a very logical thing to do.
That's a good business. Yeah. That's a really good business right there.
Yeah. It's amazing to me who calls and asks me to speak, because I'm thinking, what's a corn and soybean grower in the Midwest going to do in Montana, for example? But it's not the fact that I'm a corn and soybean grower. It's the fact that I am there teaching the principles of soil health, and I can show the folks how to reduce inputs. Because that's what we've done in our whole journey.
Yeah. And then you think about the longevity of your operation, because as you improve your soil, that means that you're going to be able to keep growing on this land far longer than the other lots that are turning into dust bowls.
Now, one of the things that a lot of people want to say is that our system is very resilient. I don't disagree with that. But what we have to understand is we can only be resilient so long. Here's what I mean by that. As we all know, the weather's changing. It's changing drastically. We have had 3 years in a row of what are called micro droughts. 6 to 8 weeks of no rain and 95 degrees. We've had that happen the last 3 years. Everybody's crops got crushed. Now, ours did too, but ours resiliency was 3 weeks longer than any of our neighbors were. So our neighbors were folding at week 3, where we weren't folding until week 6 or 7.
Right.
Okay? So we have to understand that a lot of people want to say that the regenerative systems are more resilient and can withstand. You can only withstand so much wrath from Mother Nature. I don't care what that wrath is. You can only withstand so much. So I just want to make sure people understand that, yes, we are more resilient, but we're still not totally insulated.
Right. Not bulletproof.
Not bulletproof. That's right.
And I don't think anyone expects regenerative systems to be bulletproof, but I do think that there is a certain logic in making the soil more absorbent when it does rain. Right.
Yeah.
And that was your initial inspiration, was seeing what heavy rains did to the topsoil.
Right.
It just erodes off the topsoil if you don't have deep enough root systems that allow for water to drain.
To infiltration.
And that came up yesterday too in the meeting, where Christine was saying a lot of our flooding issues are due to soil erosion and lack of soil density.
That's right. And you know, we had a very wet spring here, okay? And we had 2 rain events, and one of those rain events, some of the areas had over 3 inches of rain in 45 minutes. Okay? That's a lot. It's a lot of rain. I don't know what the math on that is exactly, but it's going to be close to 4 inches an hour. Okay? It will blow your mind how quickly the creeks and streams are flooding over their bank. And it's not because of the 4 inches that landed where that creek is. It's the 4 inches that hit the fields that are in that watershed that have no water infiltration, and the water all surface drains, taking the soil with it.
And the pesticides.
And the pesticides to the stream. So we don't have a flood problem in this country. We have a water infiltration problem.
Yep.
This farm here, the average on this farm, it was done 2 years ago. I need to have it updated. But we have water infiltration rates on this farm of 20 inches an hour. That's important. Here's the other important thing. The more aggregate stability you have in your soil profile, which means the more pore space you have in your soil, the more water it can hold. So guess what? When it becomes arid in the middle of August in the Midwest, we've still got water in our tank because our profile is full. And our neighbors, every rain that comes, they get a ½ inch an hour where we get 20 inches an hour.
Wow. That's exceptional.
And you saw that piece of dirt from the neighbor yesterday. It was like a brick.
It was a brick.
It was a brick.
There's no water going into that soil.
No, it's all glazed off. And it's just simply, the soil is, we can't even call it soil. It's dirt. It is dying.
Yeah. Well, and part of the reason why climate's changing is that the natural systems, 900 million acres of farmland in this country, if they're not absorbing life into the soil, and we know that life creates these moisture environments above the soil too. Which impacts, I imagine, these microclimates across the United States.
Yeah, we're seeing them.
And these microclimates, when taken in sum, influence weather patterns.
That's right.
So this to me is something that if anyone has any interest in the climate crisis, the only logical and beneficial approach to addressing the climate crisis is regenerative agriculture. It wins every single time.
It checks every box off.
Every possible rubric.
Yeah.
It's the only one that makes sense. The only one that I think that the government should have any business in investing in as well, because the returns are so high.
But again, let's go back to the beginning of our conversation. And I've been fortunate enough to testify in front of Congress. I was honored. I got called by Chairman Scott, wanted me to come to the first ever regenerative
hearing
at the congressional level, and you get to see, though, Nicole, you get to see the people that they want to push back on this because of what we talked about earlier. I just don't think they understand. They feel like they need to. The only way they can help the farmer is to give them subsidy payments. And we need to break that. We've got to let them understand that we don't have to chase the 300 bushel yield corn. I don't think they understand. What would happen to price if every farmer in the country had raised 300 bushel corn? Where would the price of corn go?
Well,
It'd go to $2.
Would starve to death.
It'd go to $2.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense.
No.
And it's one thing if the subsidies were going into what you do, but they're not. They're going into the creation of corn syrup and ethanol, typically. So that's not food. No. Corn syrup and ethanol is not food fit for human consumption. So nothing. Yeah. Again, just going back to the insanity of it all. And also, anytime we talk about the insanity of it all, we got to talk about how easily addressed it is. $10 billion in a new food-focused, nutrition-focused farm investment. Farmer investment.
The 10
Food
billion,
and farmer.
I mean, a few years ago, 10 billion seemed like a lot of money. Today, that's nothing, isn't it?
Out of a $1.5 trillion budget, it's less than 1%.
Yeah. That seems very doable.
It's very doable. So we're just asking for less than 1% of the farm bill to go into this regenerative infrastructure effort. It would be transformative.
I'm very pleased though, Nicole, there are a lot of boots on the ground that are driving this thing. There's a lot of people in DC right now that have been speaking their voice, and which we should be allowed to do. We should be allowed to say, speak our mind. And there are a lot of people there now, a lot of organizations that are feet to the ground and talking to the bureaucratic system. So maybe we can make some change.
I 100% think we can make some change, and it might be step one, calling out the corruption as we see it. Our system is suicidal because of the corruption, and we got to weed out that influence on our legislators. We've got to make sure there's no influence there, so that legislators can think cogently and free from that kind of pressure.
Right. Yeah.
So I see it all working together. From as granular as you can't reverse Citizens United, unfortunately, but you can pass a constitutional amendment that limits how much an individual or a corporation can give to a candidate. That would make a big difference. 22 states have endorsed it, which is exciting.
That's good.
We could have a new constitutional amendment that helps us weed out corruption from our political process. To think that what an immediate impact that alone would have on what ends up on the dinner table.
That would be a huge swing.
It would be.
And again, I like to go up to the 50,000 feet and just kind of look down, and I think about. And I only know what I read, okay? You have to assume that some of the stuff you read's true, and you assume that some you read's not. But some of these Congress people that have been there a long time, they come into Washington D.C. worth $1 million and they're leaving worth $300 million. How does that happen? How does that happen?
That's how.
Exactly.
Bags of cash and
so that's pretty easy. That's pretty easy to see. That's pretty easy to see, right? Yeah. So that's just what boggles my mind. Things that are so apparent right in front of you, we can't seem to make the connection.
I'm concerned that there's just been hopelessness and apathy that has taken hold in this country. And, the fastest way to kill our liberty and our health and our sovereignty is to have apathy in the face of this kind of corruption. We've got to vote our way out of this, and we got to call it out when we see it. And we have to do it from this perspective of, if I don't, my family is going to lose a loved one.
Yeah.
And it might be true that, generations just dwindle as a result in terms of size, health, and ability to thrive. And we can't let that happen.
No way.
Well, thank you
for
the work you're doing.
You're welcome. It's well worth it. It's very rewarding. John Kemp and I were talking this morning. It's so nice to get an email or a text message from someone you don't even know, and you've touched them in some way, and the practices that you have been out preaching, they have now implemented and to success. Yeah. That's exciting.
It's transformative.
That makes your day.
Yeah.
That might make your week. So, and that happens a lot. I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of texts, and it takes time to move through all of those. Some I don't get to very quickly, but we can only do so much. I mean, I'm running pretty thin right now already. So, but it's all worth it. It's all worth it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And you really are doing God's work.
Well, I appreciate that.
Of taking care of the land, but also taking the time. It takes a lot of time to do what you do to educate everybody.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you for that.
You're welcome.